Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this video, we're going to be looking at the top 10 Arbalesters in Age of Empires 2. Now, Arbalesters are a fantastic unit. They're very cheap at just 25 wood and 45 gold. They're created much more easily from archery ranges than most unique archer units from castles. They have decent attack, one more than a town center, bonus damage against spear units, making them great to pair with various types of cavalry, good range, relatively low attack delay, making them easy to micro, and those are just generic ones. If you're Japanese, Magyars, Incas, or Byzantines, and have simply fully upgraded Arbalesters, they're a great unit, though a few civilizations managed to add something a little extra on top. We're spoiled for choice on this list, and let's take a look at the best Arbalesters the game has to offer. Starting off at number 10, we have the Koreans, and number 9 is the Portuguese. I'm putting these two together as their bonuses follow a very similar idea, with Koreans having a 50% wood discount along with free armor upgrades, and Portuguese having a 20% gold discount, translating into 12 and 9 resources saved respectively. Despite being smaller in an absolute sense, I actually think the Portuguese discount is slightly better, as gold is more likely to be the limiting resource in the late game, especially in 1v1s, but even in team games, wood is generally very easy to get. Now, discounts are always tricky to rank, as if we balance by total resources, either of these would pretty easily take care of Arbalesters without a discount, as ranged units are very sensitive to Lanchester's square law, and even small advantages in starting numbers will often beat higher stat units. Though if we're talking about the quote best Arbalesters in the game, I really want to put some extra weight on Arbalesters with something more than generic stats. In fact, I think you could argue there are civilizations with fully upgraded Arbalesters that throw in a civ bonus giving at least as much value as these discounts, but I'm still happy to give them the first 2 spots on the list. Next, we have another pairing of civilizations that again do similar things through different means, and that's Italians at number 8 and Vietnamese at number 7. Both are more durable than usual, with Italians having +1/+1 armor through a passive civ bonus, and Vietnamese have 20% more HP. The reason I say they do similar things is in a lot of common matchups, you get the exact same effect from both. Whether that be one extra shot from an enemy elite skirmisher going from 6 to 7, an extra shot from Arbalesters from 7 to 8, or taking the same number of hits from some very common units like Hussars and Cavaliers. I personally would argue that Vietnamese come out slightly better, as HP is more impactful against high damage units like mangonels, onagers, and bombard cannons, which are pretty dangerous counters to mass Arbalester, and saving even a few units on the periphery now and then can be valuable. That all said, Arbalesters are already so squishy that you never really want to be tanking any damage with them to begin with. I tend to see these bonuses as mostly tiebreakers against generic units rather than really changing any important dynamics or counters, which I would argue some of the higher placements on the list do in a more obvious way. Our next Arbalester is then actually a good example of that, and at number 6 we have the Saracens. Against enemy units, they're mostly just a fully upgraded Arbalester, but have 2 implicit advantages. The first is the Saracen market, which gives a better exchange rate and can at least arguably match the Portuguese gold discount in value, which is nice for a unit that costs about 2/3 gold. More infamous though is their team bonus, giving their Arbalesters officially +2, but very technically +3 bonus damage against buildings. In many cases, that'll change the damage per shot from just the minimum of 1 to 3 against anything ranging from a town center, barracks, stone wall, castle, etc., regardless of whether your opponent has researched masonry and architecture or not. In other cases where the Arbalester's attack overpowers the pierced armor of a building, like against a stone or fortified gate, you can see the full +3 bonus on top of regular damage. But thinking of it as usually having +2 more than the minimum of 1 is generally the easier way to go, and why the devs chose that technically incorrect wording. Now, you tend to think of this bonus mostly in the early game to help break through palisades and help with early pressure, but even in the late game, it can help you more credibly threaten things like production buildings, where 30 Saracen Arbalesters, for example, can take down a barracks with masonry in 45 seconds, similar to a Saracen trebuchet with their unique tech for 15% more damage. Of course, Saracens have other ways to take out buildings, with siege rams, bomber cannons, or trebuchets, and I may be overselling how often they're actually used for raising buildings, but I'm also working off a reputation I somehow don't like this bonus. In my defense, it's now twice as good as the last time I said anything negative about it, back when their cavalry archer bonus was the real one for buildings to watch out for. Moving on, we have another civilization some might say I'm overrating, at number 5 with the Vikings. They have a very interesting trade-off happening, where on the plus side, they have a great economy heading into Imperial Age from free handcart, and then their Arbalesters get an extra +1 attack from a unique tech. The downside is Vikings no longer have Thumb Ring, which, if you don't know, doesn't just give Arbalesters a bump from 90 to 100% accuracy, but even more importantly, an 18% attack speed boost. So Vikings hit harder, but reload slower than 18 other Arbalesters in the game with that tech. In many cases, this is actually not a good trade-off in DPS. At long range, for anything with 6 or less pierce armor, you get more damage out of a generic civilization with thumb ring than Vikings fully upgraded. So what are they doing at number 5? Well, two things. First off, at close range, their accuracy goes to 100%, in which case it's more like 4 pierce armor and less that Vikings underperform, whereas most things in Imperial Age have at least 4 pierce armor. So at close range, Vikings are just as good as a civ with thumb ring most of the time. Second, the Vikings' advantage against high pierce armor targets, either at close or long range, can be substantial. Against a paladin with 7 pierce armor, for instance, they're doing from 2 up to 14% more damage at point blank range, doing their best work up close when the paladins are really threatening you. While then against an elite skirmisher with 8 pierce armor, Vikings do 15 to roughly 28% more damage over time than a generic civ with thumb ring. So in some really important matchups for the unit, that +1 attack can really come in clutch. I'm a big fan of bonuses and techs that become unexpectedly good at just the right moment, and even if Vikings sometimes underperform generic Arbalesters against low armor targets, I think there's enough upside to overlook that. Next up, at number 4, we have the new civilization that actually inspired this whole list, and that's the shoe. I had originally thought they would end up ranking higher, as they're fully upgraded with some nice discounts along the way, so there's no question the Arbalester feels smooth to tech into, and even gets a bit of extra sight. The main selling feature for our purposes here, though, is their unique tech, giving them 2 extra projectiles, which sounds pretty amazing at first. The problem is those extra arrows only do 3 pierce damage, and as I just mentioned, many units in Imperial Age have at least 4 pierce armor from blacksmith upgrades alone, while the extra arrows are also very inaccurate, as you can see. Against a single target, they basically never land, and even against a bunched up group of champions, for example, they only end up doing about 10% more damage over time. To be clear, 10% more damage is very solid, it's just not quite as impressive as all those arrows look. Of course, they're then a bit better against buildings as well, albeit unlike Saracens you have to pay for a unique tech, and for some reason often only 1 or 2 of the 3 arrows actually count, which is a bug I've noticed against buildings for the Chukunu as well. Combining even just a bit more damage against buildings with 10% more against large groups of units lands them in the top 4, though despite maybe a bit of excitement and bias toward highlighting a new civilization, I just don't see them going any higher. Moving on, at number 3, we have one of the classic top tier archer civilizations, the Mayans. If this was strictly an archer civ list, Mayans are a good candidate for number 1, but remember we're just looking at the Arbalester here. Not only do they have a 30% discount, but I also consider their 15% last or longer resource bonus as a part of this as well. I know I held Koreans and Portuguese back for being otherwise generic, and Mayans are as well, but the Mayans' value is so completely next level, you can't disrespect them like that. From a freshly discovered gold pile on the map, the discount plus longer lasting resources means you get over 60% more Arbalesters than a generic civ from that limited source. Unfortunately, Mayans don't give you the option of combining Arbalesters with light cavalry or hussars, and you also have the plumed archer with its much higher HP and speed stealing a bit of the spotlight. But if we're talking about civs that can make Arbalesters feel unstoppable, Mayans have to be in that discussion. In fact, they might even be number 1 if Obsidian Arrows was still around, giving them +6 against buildings, as then they'd be better than generic Arbalesters individually as well. Now, amazingly, there are 2 civilizations I would still rank higher, including at number 2, the Ethiopians. This is a simple one to understand. They fire 18% faster on top of being fully upgraded, end of story. At their maximum range, that gives them the highest damage output against any unit, up to and including 8 pierce armor, and around 40% more damage than an Arbalester without thumb ring. That said, I'd understand a bit of criticism here, as they technically tie Vietnamese and Italians one-on-one, despite those being way down on the list, so it might seem like I'm overvaluing DPS here. But I think that's easily justified by the fact you shouldn't want Arbalesters tanking arrows, you want them dealing massive damage from long range. Ethiopians, by some of the most straightforward measures, are some of the best at doing that with a given number of units. Now before we get to number 1, I have a quick honorable mention for a civilization that doesn't exist yet, but I assume will at some point, having +5% archer speed as a civ bonus. It feels like every other stat for the Arbalester has been tweaked except for this one, and I imagine it's only a matter of time. Even at 5%, an Arbalester that's just a bit faster at kiting and escaping elite skirmishers or onagers would be very strong and earn a spot in the top 10. At number 1 though, we have a civilization that does exist, going all the way back to Age of Kings with no change in stats for 25 years running. It's the Briton Arbalester. Admittedly, Britons don't even have thumb ring, so they do 15% less damage than even a Japanese Arbalester. But I don't care. This is all about having 3 more range than everything else on the list between a civ bonus and a unique tech. I'll say it again, you don't want Arbalesters tanking damage. You want them dishing out DPS from range, and Britons sacrifice a bit of DPS for a lot of range, 11 of it compared to most Arbalesters 8. With that, you outrange onagers with siege engineers by 2, elite skirmishers with bracer by 3, and have some extra time to take down charging paladins or anything else, where it's about beating their counters without being put in any danger at all. They even outrange castles missing bracer, so they're a greater threat to those than Saracens. And maybe the one caveat in all of this is the elite longbowman also exists, with 1 more attack and range, though the Briton Arbalester is much easier to master in their archery ranges, which even work 10% faster. It's certainly a little overshadowed by their unique unit, but I still consider it the highest ceiling and at times the most annoying Arbalester to face, even with its lack of thumb ring. That'll do it for this one though. Did my list hit the mark? Let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.